The fallen phoenix, the smoke rose in twisted columns against Kepler 442b's amber sky, each pillar marking another grave in what had once been Firebase Delta. Captain Ryland Cross adjusted his breathing mask as he stepped through the wreckage. Boots crunching over crystallized sand turned to glass by plasma fire. The orbital bombardment had ended 6 hours ago, but the air still shimmered with residual heat. His orders were simple: sweep for survivors, extract what intel remained, and evacuate before the hegemony ground forces arrived. The timeline was tight, maybe 30 minutes before enemy drop pods started raining down like deadly hail, yet something kept pulling him deeper into the ruins, past the twisted remains of defensive turrets and the carbonized shadows of soldiers caught in the open. "Sanctuary Base, this is Rescue 7, he spoke into his comm unit, voice muffled by the mask. "Firebase Delta is completely compromised, no signs of—" A sound stopped him cold. Not the settling groan of cooling metal or the whisper of wind through broken walls. This was different. Rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Cross drew his sidearm and moved toward the sound, weaving between chunks of reinforced concrete and the skeletal remains of barracks buildings. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, coming from what had been the Firebase's central command bunker. Half the structure had collapsed, massive support beams twisted like broken fingers, but part of the underground complex remained intact. He found the source behind a wall of debris, a gloved hand emerging from beneath a fallen ceiling panel, 3 fingers tapping against a piece of rebar in precise intervals. Military percussion code, not random, not accident. SOS Cross holstered his weapon and grabbed the largest chunk of concrete, muscles straining as he heaved it aside. More debris followed, each piece revealing more of the person trapped beneath. A shoulder appeared, then an arm, then a face streaked with blood and dust. She was conscious, alert, and absolutely furious. "About damn time," the woman gasped, her voice hoarse but steady. "Thought I'd have to spell it out in Morse code." Cross blinked, momentarily stunned. He'd expected to find a wounded soldier, maybe a tech specialist who'd taken shelter when the bombing started. What he found instead was Zara Voss, the ghost of Firebase Delta, the sniper whose kill count had become legend among both coalition forces and hegemony troops, who whispered her name like a curse. Sergeant Voss? He knelt beside her, already reaching for his medical kit. "We need to get you out of here. Enemy ground forces are—" "I know exactly where they are," she interrupted, trying to push herself up. The effort sent a wave of pain across her features, and she collapsed back against the rubble. 12 clicks south-southeast, moving in formation. Saw their dust clouds before this whole place came down on me. Cross began clearing more debris from around her torso, working methodically despite the time pressure. As each piece moved, his heart sank further. Her legs were pinned beneath a massive support beam, the kind that would take heavy equipment to move. Equipment they didn't have. Time they didn't have. "How long have you been trapped?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Since the first wave hit. Maybe 4 hours." Zara's eyes were sharp despite her condition, cataloging his movements, his gear, probably calculating their chances of survival down to the decimal point. "You're Cross, right? The rescue pilot everyone talks about." "That's me." He activated, his portable scanner sweeping it over the beam, pinning her legs. The readings made his stomach clench. The weight distribution, the angle of impact. Moving this would require precision they couldn't afford, and strength they didn't possess. "Listen, Sergeant, we need to—" "Call me Zara." She watched his face as he studied the scanner readout, her expression never changing. "And you can stop trying to figure out how to sugarcoat it. I can see the beam. I know what it means." Cross met her gaze. In the amber light filtering through the destroyed ceiling, her eyes were the color of steel, hard and uncompromising. He'd seen that look before on soldiers who'd made peace with impossible odds. "The beam goes or I don't," she said simply. "And we both know you can't move it alone. I can try—" "No." The word came out flat, final. "I've been doing the math. For 4 hours, Captain. You've got maybe 20 minutes before hegemony boots are stomping through here. You can spend those 20 minutes trying to move an immovable object. or you can complete your mission and get out alive. Cross stood slowly, his hands hovering over his equipment belt. Standard protocol was clear. Don't risk additional lives. For casualties who couldn't be extracted, he'd followed that protocol dozens of times, made those hard choices, lived with the weight of necessary sacrifice. But this wasn't just any soldier. This was Zara Voss, who'd held Firebase Delta for 3 months against impossible odds, who'd turned the tide of 6 major engagements with nothing but a rifle and unshakable will. The Coalition couldn't afford to lose her. More than that, he couldn't afford to lose her. "What if I told you there was another way?" he said quietly. Zara's eyebrow arched. "I'd say you're either lying or crazy. Maybe both." Cross knelt again, this time pulling out a device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a construction tool. "Plasma cutter. Surgical grade. If I can't move the beam, you'll cut through my legs." She said it without flinching, as matter of fact, as discussing the weather. "Field amputation. Cauterize the wounds, dose me with enough stims to keep me conscious, and haul me out like a sack of supplies." Something like that. He was already calibrating the device, hands moving with practiced efficiency. "I won't lie to you. It's going to hurt like hell, and there's no guarantee we'll make it to the extraction point before you go into shock." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Cross pause his preparations. "There are 17 bodies in this compound," she said. "Good soldiers, my people. They stayed here because I asked them to. They died here because I convinced them this ground was worth holding. Zara, I'm not leaving them." Her eyes snapped back to his, burning with fierce resolve. "Not to rot in the sun while hegemony forces pick through their gear like scavengers. If you're going to cut me loose, we take them with us." Cross stared at her, incredulous. "That's impossible. My ship can't carry—" "Your ship can carry 17 dog tags and 17 personal effects," she interrupted. "Doesn't weigh much. Means everything." The sound of distant engines began to echo across the wasteland, the low rumble of approaching dropships. Cross glanced at his chronometer. 15 minutes, maybe less. He looked back at Zara, at the woman who'd single-handedly held a firebase against an entire hegemony division, who was now asking him to risk both their lives for the dignity of the dead. In her steel-gray eyes, he saw something he'd been searching for through years of war. Someone who understood that some things mattered more than survival. "Okay," he said, activating the plasma cutter. "We do this fast, we do this quiet, and we get everyone home." For the first time since he'd found her, Zara Voss smiled. The plasma beam hummed to life, and Captain Ryland Cross began the most important rescue of his career. Rising from ruins, the medical frigate Sanctuary's Edge drifted through the void like a ghost ship, its hull scarred from years of rescue missions along the war's bleeding edge. In the ship's cramped medical bay, Zara Voss lay motionless on the biobed, her body a map of healing wounds and fresh trauma. Where her legs had once been, the medical fabricators had crafted temporary prosthetic stumps. Functional but cold, a constant reminder of what Firebase Delta had cost her. 3 weeks had passed since Cross had cut her free from the rubble. 3 weeks of surgeries, of nerve reconstruction, of watching her transformation from legendary sniper to, what? She stared at the ceiling panels, counting the scratches in the metal plating for the 100th time. Each mark told a story of some other rescue, some other broken soldier carried away from the flames. "Your physical therapy scores are improving," Cross said, entering the medical bay with a steaming cup of synthetic coffee. He'd taken to checking on her every few hours, sometimes bringing reports, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. "Dr. Reeves says you'll be cleared for mobility trials soon." Zara didn't turn her head. "Mobility trials, that's what we're calling it now?" "Learning to walk again," Cross said bluntly, settling into the chair beside her bed. "No point in dancing around it." She finally looked at him, noting the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. "When's the last time you slept? Real sleep, not whatever you've been doing in the pilot's chair." "I sleep fine." "Liar." Zara pushed herself up on her elbows, the movement still awkward without her legs for balance. "You've got that look. Same. One I used to see in the mirror after long sniper vigils. Haunted, guilty, like you're carrying ghosts. Cross sipped his coffee, buying time. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly past, each one a distant sun that might warm worlds where the war hadn't yet reached. We all carry ghosts, some more than others. Zara studied his profile, cataloging the details she'd noticed during their long journey. The scar along his jaw from some old crash, the way his hands never quite stopped moving, always checking instruments, adjusting controls, as if stillness meant death. How many? How many what? How many people have you pulled? Out of situations like mine, how many didn't make it? Cross was quiet for so long that Zara thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Too many of both. Before Zara could respond, the ship's alarm system shrieked to life. Red lights bathed the medical bay as the artificial gravity fluctuated, sending loose equipment floating briefly before slamming back down. Cross was on his feet instantly, coffee forgotten as he rushed to the nearest comm panel. Sanctuary base, this is Sanctuary's Edge, he called into the device. Static answered him. Sanctuary base, do you copy? The ship shuddered as something impacted the hull. Not debris, too controlled, too purposeful. Weapons fire. We're under attack, Cross said, more to himself than to Zara. He was already moving toward the door, his pilot's instincts taking over. Stay here. Lock the medical bay and like hell. Zara was struggling to sit up fully, her hands gripping the bed rails. I may not have legs, but I still have eyes and a brain. You need a gunner. You need medical supervision. One wrong move and what? I'll die? Zara's laugh was sharp, bitter. I already died on Kepler 442b. Everything since then is borrowed time. She looked at him with those steel gray eyes, the same fierce determination that had held Firebase, Delta for 3 months. I'm not spending my borrowed time hiding in a medical bay while someone tries to kill the man who saved my life. Another impact rocked the ship, this one strong enough to knock Cross against the doorframe. Emergency lighting flickered as the main power grid struggled to compensate for whatever damage they'd taken. The bridge? Zara asked. Solo pilot configuration, no room for a wheelchair. Then we improvise. Zara's hands were already working at the restraints holding her to the medical bed. Help me to the secondary weapons console. I can operate targeting systems from there. Cross hesitated for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to weigh their chances alone against their chances together. Then he was moving, helping her transfer from the bed to the ship's compact mobility chair, a temporary solution until her prosthetics. We're ready. The journey to the ship's secondary bridge took precious minutes they didn't have. Each corridor seemed longer than the last, each turn revealing new damage from the ongoing assault. Sparks showered from overhead conduits as they passed, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. Hegemony raiders, Cross explained, as they moved, his voice tight with concentration. 3 ships, modified assault corvettes. They must have been tracking our sensor signature since we left Kepler 442b. Looking for me specifically, or just any coalition vessel? Does it matter? Zara considered this as they reached the secondary bridge, a cramped space lined with backup controls and emergency systems. It matters because if they want me alive, they'll be more careful with their shots. If they just want us dead, they'll keep pounding us until we're scrap metal. Cross was already at the pilot station, his hands dancing across holographic displays as he tried to assess their situation. Hull integrity at 60% and falling. Main engines offline. We're running on emergency power and prayers. Zara maneuvered her chair to the weapons console, her fingers finding familiar patterns even on unfamiliar equipment. Targeting systems, power distribution, ammunition status. The basics were the same whether you were holding a rifle or controlling. Ship-mounted cannons. We've got 2 pulse cannons and a missile launcher, she reported, studying the tactical display. Not much against 3 corvettes, but... She paused, her trained eye catching something in the enemy formation. Wait. Look at their approach vector. Cross glanced at her screen, then back at his own displays. They're flying in a straight line. No evasive patterns. Because they think we're defenseless. Zara's smile was predatory, the expression of a hunter who'd just spotted prey. Medical frigates don't usually shoot back. They're treating this like a simple boarding action. Can you work with that? Give me manual control of the targeting system and watch what 3 months of sniper training can do to overconfident pirates. The ship shuddered again as another energy blast scored their hull. But this time Zara was ready. Her hands moved across the weapons console with practiced precision, locking onto the lead corvette's engine signature. She didn't fire immediately. Instead, she waited, calculating vectors and timing like she was back on Firebase Delta with a rifle in her hands and an enemy in her crosshairs. Steady, she murmured, more to herself than to Cross. Steady. The lead corvette was coming around for another strafing run, confident in its superiority when Zara fired. The pulse cannon blast took the ship directly in its main drive assembly, sending it spinning away in a shower of debris and venting atmosphere. One down, she said calmly, already tracking the second ship. 2 to go. But the remaining corvettes had learned their lesson. They broke formation, coming at the medical frigate from different angles, forcing Zara to choose between targets. She managed to wing the second ship, but the third slipped through her firing arc and landed a devastating hit on their port side. We can't keep this up, Cross said through gritted teeth, fighting to keep the ship stable as systems failed around them. One more hit like that and we're done. Zara stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. In her sniper days, she'd learned that sometimes the best shot wasn't the one you could see. It was the one you could create. What's our engine status? She asked. Dead. Why? Not dead, just offline. Zara's fingers were already working at the engineering controls, rerouting power from life support to the main drive. If I can get them running for just 30 seconds, that's suicide. Without life support, we'll have 30 seconds of engine power and full weapon capacity. Zara looked at him, her steel-gray eyes burning with the same fire that had made her legend. 30 seconds to end this fight or die trying. Cross met her gaze and saw his own desperation reflected there. They were both soldiers who'd already lost everything that mattered. All they had left was each other and the choice of how their story would end. Do it, he said. Zara's hands flew across the controls, rerouting power, bypassing safety protocols, turning their medical frigate into a weapon. The engines came online with a roar that shook the entire ship, and suddenly they were moving again, diving toward the remaining corvettes like a bird of prey. Now! Zara shouted, and Cross pushed the engines to maximum burn while she fired everything they had. Pulse cannons, missiles, even the emergency flares. The second corvette, caught completely off guard by their sudden aggression, took the full barrage and simply ceased to exist. The third ship tried to run, but Zara had anticipated that too. Her final missile caught it just as it turned, the explosion, lighting up the void like a brief, violent star. Then silence. Emergency power kicked in, life support resumed, and they were alone again among the stars. Cross and Zara sat in the dim emergency lighting, breathing hard, both of them shaking from adrenaline and the nearness of death. Finally, Cross spoke. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the craziest. Both, Zara replied, her voice hoarse but steady. Definitely both. She looked at him then. Really looked at him and saw something she hadn't expected to find again. Partnership. Not pity, not obligation, but the recognition of one warrior by another. So, she said quietly, what happens now? Cross was quiet, for a moment studying the stars through the cracked viewport. Now we figure out how to live with being alive. Both of us. For the first time since Firebase Delta, Zara Voss felt like she might have a future worth fighting for.